Welcome to the Longevity Lab, where we turn burnout into bioclarity. I'm your host, Dr. Jae Hitson. We've talked a lot about stressed out executives who are breaking under the weight of the mental overload and physical neglect. But what about modern parents? Modern day mothers and fathers are managing comparable depletions, but with fewer resources, less time, and often less options. In this episode, we'll unpack what health optimization can look like for your family. How it can be realistic, affordable, and effective for real life. Whether you're running a household, a business, or probably both, this is an invitation to stop sacrificing your own health in the pursuit of perfection. Let's get started. Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Jae Hitson. So I have spent a lot of time criticizing traditional healthcare and how it is not meeting the needs of our modern professionals and our executives. These individuals are facing rapid depletion of their internal resources, and our healthcare system needs to catch up. And furthermore, with the overall trajectory, this is not going to get better. It's going to get worse. We're going to continue to see this decreasing quality of life. And what saddens me about this is that it's not that they're just not adapting fast enough. Traditional healthcare is not even considering the issue. And frankly, this is quite appalling to me because we do have the knowledge, wisdom, and technology to absolutely address and prevent all of these different health concerns. And frankly, people deserve better. But then recently I was having this conversation about what's happening with the modern family. And it is really striking how the modern family and the trajectory of the stresses that are on our mothers, fathers, children, well, there's a lot of similarities to what we're seeing in the professional world with these executives. How there's just so much more stress that's absolutely draining them. These families are living these lives that are so busy, they really don't have time for proper fuel. And our families, just like our executives, there's not a lot of physical labor involved in their everyday life, so their margin for error and weight management has become incredibly narrow. And because the stress is starting earlier and earlier, and it's staying on not just for days, but decades, we're starting to see the downward death spiral happening earlier and earlier. It used to be something that we didn't see well into the 60s, but now individuals are in their late 30s and 40s, and they're already losing their momentum. And frankly, in the last 2.5 decades, never seen the level of health concerns in 20-year-olds like what I've been seeing in the last 5 to 10 years. And these families, just like our professionals, they are feeling the inadequacies of our healthcare system and how they're not getting the health and the help that they really need. They're getting very tired of this standard of care that is essentially wait for the system to break and then put you on a medication for the rest of your life. And frankly, that is not good enough for this generation. And that is not good enough for the modern family. Let's face it, we want more for ourselves, but we also want more for our children. And there's no way around it. When we look at children today, they are not as healthy as generations past. So for those of you who are not familiar with my work, I talk about how stress depletes resources. Now, when I'm talking about resources, I'm talking about vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. And please understand that these are the things that keep all of our systems running. Too often, all we think we need is calories to keep going. And while that can be true in the short run, to be truly healthy at the cellular level, you really need vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. So for individuals who are living these very complex, very busy, very stressful lives, well, you're depleting those resources down, and then there's just not enough left over to run all the other systems. And frankly, you can only run on fumes for so long before something just breaks down. And when I'm talking about stress, when you look at mothers and fathers, let's start with fathers. Dads used to be able to come home from work, sit down in the easy chair, have dinner with their family at their home, and their evening was maybe playing a little catch in the backyard, possibly mowing the grass. Worst case scenario, maybe sit in front of the TV. Now dads are racing home so they can shuttle one child to this recital because mom is carpooling for the other, and their days have turned into this one big long marathon from sun up to sundown. And then there are mothers. While so many of us are second generation work outside the home moms, I really do not feel like our mothers prepared us for a quality work-life family balance. I mean, times have really changed. I was raised in the 80s, and I swear our parents had no idea where we even were half the time. Do you remember latchkey kids? Today, that sounds like something that would get you reported. I mean, we really cannot imagine not knowing where our children are almost every second of the day. And then to add to that, we have to take into account the toll that pregnancies and nursing impose on the human body. I mean, a healthy pregnancy can be an incredible drain on your resources, but then a complicated pregnancy, we've seen that completely bottom a woman out. And it is so rare for any woman to take the time that she needs to refuel and recover post-pregnancy and post-nursing. I mean, when you look back on how many years your body was an entire fuel source for another living human being. Really think about that. Between pregnancies and breastfeeding, How long were your resources getting drained? And really, how much thought did you ever give to recovery? And then now, by the time our children are even 3 years old, we're already moving into play dates and recitals and t-ball practices. I mean, there are toddlers who are getting music lessons and tutoring in their parents' attempts to try to get them ahead. All I have to say is this is intense, and all of it is taking a toll on your health and ultimately the health of your children. And I know I'm talking to well-meaning parents and grandparents. You wouldn't have made it this far into the video if you weren't. You want to do the absolute best by your children. You just want to know what to do. So when I'm talking about all of the pressures on the modern family, especially parents, really, on a biochemical level, it's only marginally different than what I'm seeing with these elite executives. And to counteract the stress that the executives are under, a lot of them are now getting these executive physicals. It's an intense battery of tests that's designed to catch any and all emerging disease processes. And they're doing it because they don't have time to be down. Professionals need every ounce of energy they can get. Their mental clarity, it really matters. But are those needs all that different from today's average mother and father? You have no time to be down. You need some more energy. You need to be able to think clearly. And there is phenomenal benefit to getting this kind of testing, catching disease processes early, turning them around, reversing them before you ever have a problem. And probably the only reason that every parent isn't getting this kind of testing done on themselves is that the price tag for these physicals is somewhere between $12,000 to $15,000. And keep in mind, that is completely out of pocket, no insurance coverage. And I will tell you, the vast majority of these executives, they say that the physical is worth every penny. But when I'm talking about a typical mother and father who barely has enough time to go to the bathroom by themselves, much less go and set themselves up for a $15,000 physical, what can they do? What should they be doing to keep their health at the highest levels while still navigating all the pressures of today's modern world? Because everyone deserves at the same level of health and stamina and clarity. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you just a small handful of the tools that we use to help busy people maintain their optimal health. Before I get into those strategies, I want to let you know that I am going to be doing a series of live Q&A webinars called Biohacking the Busy Family. There is typically a premium for access to these webinars, but for those of you who go over into the description and click the Register Now button, you can get free access to the next webinar that has available seating, because I truly do empathize with you. I'm a mother. My babies are 22 and 23 years old. I know what it feels like to feel like you're just being pulled in every direction and you're just trying not to break. So what I'm going to share with you today are just some of my favorite things that I've discovered in the last 2.5 decades, learning from other parents and physicians as to what really works, what doesn't work, and what's standing the test of time. And I've had this unique vantage point where I've not only gotten to see what seems to be working from an observer's point of view, but by being able to see what's happening on a biochemical level year after year and how that data moves when you make the right, and sometimes wrong choices. So rule number 1, you have to take care of yourself first. I know it's a tired cliche. You've got to put your own oxygen mask on before you try to help others. But cliches are a cliche because, frankly, they're true. Hands down, stressed out parents end up raising stressed out children. Parents who struggle with their own health issues, they tend to have children who are hypersensitive to health concerns. These children, they get the message very early on that you can't trust the body to heal itself, in spite of the fact that that is exactly what the body was designed to do. So many people have gotten caught up in this narrative that it's selfish to take care of your own needs. And they get caught in this defeating cycle of self-sacrifice. What I am talking about here is not selfish. It's about setting the right example, creating the patterns that you want your children to run on for the rest of their lives. Do you want your children to have a lifelong pattern of stress, anxiety, and exhaustion? Because if that's what you're living, that's what they're picking up on, and more than you realize. So when you go to high school graduation, so often they will announce each of the various students and they'll say where they're going, what they're going to be studying, and what do they want to be when they grow up. Back in my day, it was incredibly common for the children of doctors to want to become a doctor. They saw the joy and fulfillment that their parents were getting from their careers, and they wanted the same thing for themselves. Let me tell you, in recent decades, that has definitely changed. I can tell you, amongst myself and my colleagues, our children do not want to be doctors. They've seen us struggling against this broken healthcare system. They've seen all the stress that insurance and red tape and bureaucracy have caused. They have literally seen the joy being stripped out of our profession. and they want nothing to do with it. And here's another sad fact. So many of the children in my children's generation, Gen Z, they don't want to have children. And when you ask them why, they say it's because they saw all of the stress and the frustration and the lack of joy on their parents and, well, all the other parents around them. And they simply don't want that for their lives. So really think about the example that you're setting, because this excessive self-sacrifice, it may not be the message you want to be sending. How many of us were raised by overworked, stressed out parents, and we swore that would never be us? But yet, here we are. We're perpetuating the same old patterns. So point number 2. Learn how to fuel your body and know what it's asking for. There really was a time when we didn't have to be so particular about our diets. Partly this was because our foods were more nutrient rich, but also we were more physically active. So we had more margin for error with regards to our food consumption. So essentially we were able to eat more while still maintaining a smaller physique, and somewhere in that mix we were able to get the nutrients that we needed. And that simply is not the case today. I mean, you have this incredible resource drain coming from all of the stress imposed on your mental systems, but we're sitting at desks and really not moving much during our day. So essentially we're not burning calories the way we used to. And many of us are living on this razor thin edge of maximum nutrient consumption with minimal calories. I mean, if only stress burned calories, we would be the skinniest society on this planet. So back again, so many of us are operating on this incredibly narrow margin for error if we want to maintain a healthy body weight. The easiest way to find out what your body actually requires in order to meet the physical and mental demands of your life is through blood tests, because not everyone is the same. There is no one diet that can meet the needs of everyone on this planet. I mean, even from a genetic standpoint, we live such different lives, even from our siblings and our parents. Your resource demand is completely unique to you. The only way to do it without blood tests is really trial and error. But as most people figure out, we just don't have the time or the energy for trial and error anymore. Most people simply need answers. And your biodata, it can give you that blueprint that you're looking for. Now, I do realize that the average physician does not know how to look at blood work and create one of these blueprints. But there is this emerging field of functional medicine. Find someone who knows how to do this, get the data, and then follow the strategy. The results can be absolutely amazing. So I was recently working with this woman who had 3 pregnancies back to back to back, and each of them had their own traumas. She had no time to refuel between pregnancies, and surprisingly, recovery really wasn't even suggested by her doctors. All that her body went through, it really isn't a surprise that 5 years later, she is now battling with severe chronic fatigue. I mean, even worse, she feels like she's failing as a mother. She can't do a fraction of the things that she feels like she needs to do or should do for her family, much less herself. Her relationships are suffering, and she feels like every day is just an act of survival. She would keep going to her doctor, and they kept telling her, well, everything's normal. They blamed all of her issues on her stress, but she knew deep down something was really wrong. And it really did take in-depth testing to find out where the problem was. There really was so much stress in her system, and some of the supplements that she was taking, they were actually masking some of her biomarkers. But once we figured that out, it really wasn't that hard to dial in on the root cause. And it really only took a few simple changes, and she was already recovering within a couple weeks. I mention this because that elite analysis that I was talking about that executives are getting, you really can get that kind of access for hundreds of dollars and save yourself thousands, especially when you use programs like ours that focus in on addressing the root cause. And let me ask you this question. What would you be willing to spend to have that extra gear of energy from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m.? What could that one thing do for your quality of life? And that's just one small example of what strategic biofueling can do for you. I mean, when you're fueled properly, things like extra energy, mental clarity, physical stamina, and better mood, those become the norm. That is just what happens when you have the resources that you require. Now, I've been spending quite a bit of time on how you refuel. How do you fill the bucket? Now, let's talk about what empties the bucket. In today's modern first world society, an overwhelming amount of our stress is actually self-induced. I mean, you chose your life. You chose your house, your spouse, your job, the dog, and not to mention the other 5 pets that you're not taking care of. You chose the private school with the added volunteer hours, or maybe you chose to homeschool. You said yes to every single one of those after-school activities. My point here is these are all choices. Now, when I get into this section, a lot of people get super defensive. And before you start preparing your rebuttals, I really only have one question for you. And to quote Dr. Phil, How's it working for you? At this point, I want to give you a strategy. For years, I opened practices and I would help these different physicians manage their work-life family balance while trying to keep a successful business going. But before I get into that specific strategy, I want to tell you about the rule of 7. So I bet you've seen that circus act where the performer has all of those plates that are spinning all around them. And we're just in awe of how that person is able to keep all of it so balanced. So many times in my life, especially when my kids were young, I felt like I was that plate spinner. I was the person trying to keep all of these plates up in the air. But in my case, something was always breaking. Half the time I thought it was me. It seemed like no matter what I did, I couldn't keep all my plates up in the air at the same time. Something always came crashing down. And that's when I learned the rule of 7. Most people can manage about 7 major roles, 7 plates per se. But when you try to manage much more than that, something comes crashing down. So let me give you some examples of some roles, some plates. So first of all, you have your role to your physical health. Many of you are married, so you have a role to your spouse or significant other. Then you have your children. Now, I want to be very clear, if one of your children has some other health concerns or special needs, that's another role. Most of you probably have a career or a significant volunteer job. You may also be the person in charge of your finances. Someone in here has to be in charge of all of the cooking, the cleaning, the yard work, the house maintenance. And to add to that, so many of us now are getting caught in what's called the sandwich generation, where you're taking care of not only your young children, but also your aging parents, all at the same time. Now, can you see how quickly we already got to 7? And see, we didn't even mention that Sunday school class that you're teaching, doing anything for your own spiritual health. And mind you, nowhere on that list is having a good time with your friends, having an actual hobby, or the myriad of all the other things that you wish you had time for, or whether you like it or not, are stealing your time and attention. When you think of it like this, is it really any wonder that you're falling apart? And when I say that most people can handle 7, that's 7 if you're healthy. Now, if you also happen to have an autoimmune condition, GI distress, chronic fatigue, well, that's a role in itself. Now, I encourage you right now, go get a pen and paper and start making out your list. You want to write down all the things that need your time and attention. I want you to see how quickly all of this is adding up. And I want you to get a very real sense of why you always feel like something's breaking. When I first did this, I wondered, how am I keeping all this together? And then I realized, I'm not. And that's when I started getting very particular about the things that made it onto my list, because my time and my attention was not infinite, and I needed it to go to the things that mattered. And this is one of the things that I do teach on in my webinars, how to itemize all these different roles, because I bet several of you right now are looking at your list and you're like, I'm already at 15 plus and I'm not done yet. How am I ever going to get this cut down to 7 very specific joy-filled roles? I'd really love to show you how to do it. And then how to break each and every one of these down into some very specific objectives that you keep track of on a 6-week cycle. The 6-week cycle is an incredibly simple system where you create these priority breaks and you're able to really get a hold of your life and all its complexities without breaking you and your family. I go into way more detail on this in my webinars, but let me give you an example here. So my son is a baseball player, and if you're a parent who has a child on one of these different travel teams, let me tell you, that is a role all in of itself. And he was on this really amazing team and actually ended up getting to go to the World Series. I'm sure so many of you are familiar with it. It's where they bring all of the best 12-year-old teams from around the world to play in this tournament together. It really was an incredible experience, probably more so for the parents even than the kids. Well, in the mix of all of this tournament and everything, they actually had these like seminars for the parents to go to. And kind of the purpose was helping you manage your son's baseball aspirations. Well, in this seminar, they told me something absolutely shocking. They told us that statistically, even in a room like that, there was less than a 1% chance that our sons would even play Division I college ball. And the chances of them getting drafted, going to the MLB, less than 0.1%. And I remember thinking, how could that possibly be? Now, I remember sitting out on the t-ball field with a whole bunch of 5-year-olds, and I could tell you then, yeah, maybe only 1% of those. But in this room, the best in the world, 1%? Frankly, I didn't believe it. But then as the years went by, and I started to see the various boys dropping out, getting injured, getting burned out, I started to see how real the statistic really was. And I decided to take one of these 6-week breaks to really assess, what am I doing here? I mean, we're putting so much time and so much energy into this travel team. Really, where should my focus be? Because if my son has less than 1% chance of even playing college ball, well, then my focus needs to shift to something that I actually care about over the long haul. I need to make sure that this role, this area of my life that is now travel ball, it needs to be a great story for my family, irregardless of the ending. I needed to make sure it was worth it in the moment, right now, because that may be all it will ever be. And it was during one of these priority breaks where I made a big shift. I didn't want to give up on it, but I needed for this to start to become a conduit for the type of relationship that I really wanted to have with my son. I wanted to change our dynamic from what kind of athlete he was going to be to what kind of man did he need to be. And so from there, I was able to make that turn. And let me tell you, our story is still going. My son currently has a full scholarship to play Division I baseball. But more importantly, he and I have the kind of relationship that I always dreamed of. And I'm so proud of the person that he's become. But here's the twist in the story. That reassessment, that adjustment that I made, ended up changing the trajectory of his career. See, I didn't know at the time, but he was actually thinking about quitting. He was tired of all the pressure. He was getting burned out like everyone else. And frankly, he was over all of the strain that was putting on him and our entire family's life. But when I changed my dynamic, he was able to find the joy again in a sport that he really does love. So much of the stress that we are enduring, it is self-inflicted, and we need to learn to take a step back and really glean the wisdom from the situation. The other thing that I love to do is just encourage parents to look in the mirror. I used to say when I was mentoring employees, they adopt the minority of my strengths and the majority of my weaknesses. But I realized very quickly in my career, it's not worth the effort of trying to change the employee. It was so much easier just to change me and let the example lead the way. And it's really no different with our children. It can be so incredibly hard when we see our habits and our mannerisms and our quirks being manifested in these little people that we love so much. One day when my daughter was just a toddler, I walk into the room and she's sitting on the floor, Indian style, reading a book to her favorite stuffed rabbit. Now, she was a toddler and she couldn't actually read, but man, it was a cute gibberish story. But what was really funny, as I was watching her do this, she wasn't able to actually turn the pages of her little book because the rabbit was too big. She couldn't reach around. So what she'd have to do is she would have to take the rabbit off of her lap, set it to the side, turn the page, and then put the rabbit back on her lap again. But every time she would do that, before she would take the rabbit off of her lap, she would give it a kiss on its head, and then she would put it to the side, turn the page, and then put the rabbit back on her lap and give it another kiss, and then continuing on with her gibberish story. It really was incredible and extremely cute. And I remember thinking to myself, what an odd little routine. But it wasn't till the next day that I realized that every time I was putting my children onto my lap, I was giving them a kiss on the top of their heads. She was simply repeating that pattern. And I remember so clearly in that moment thinking, she is seeing everything. I simply have to be a good person. We have a tendency to want to fix everyone else. But here's the thing, it really needs to start with us. Now, the easiest way to start this process is to start with your health. Because frankly, if you have no energy, if your health is becoming very cumbersome, you don't have a whole lot of bandwidth for change. If you don't have time for DIYing your way through your health, there are people like myself who can take a look at your lab work and find out what's missing. And furthermore, we can give you that blueprint toward your real goals. You can simply go to my website, GoodDoctors.Health, and learn how we use the exploratory panel to do this. Let me tell you, it is truly amazing how much time, energy, and focus you have when you're not spending it second guessing yourself and wondering if anything's working. Now, if you're a parent or grandparent and you're wondering, what do I really need to be doing here? Is anything I'm doing making any difference at all? Am I wasting all this time with this organic food, or should I be focusing on the toxins that my children are getting exposed to? And let me tell you, there is so much information out there and conflicting opinions, it's hard to know which direction to turn. And at the same time, there's this whole host of things that I've been watching working for decades that virtually nobody is talking about and even fewer people are actually doing. These are the types of strategies that I get into during my live webinars. Normally, we do charge a premium for these types of classes, but if you go over to the description and you click the register now, you'll be granted free access to our next webinar, because I really do want to help you manage all of this and do it all with such grace. So if you're ready for that easy button, register now, because what I covered here, it's just a fraction of what I love to share with dedicated parents and grandparents who really just want the best for the health of their children. Thank you so much for your time today. I know how precious it is. Thank you for tuning in to the Longevity Lab. Hope today's episode reminded you that your health isn't optional, and it's not selfish to make it a priority. Whether you're a CEO, stay-at-home parent, or an exhausted MVP holding the show together behind the scenes, you deserve to know what your body needs and what it's trying to tell you. If you're ready to get clarity and take the next steps with confidence, head over to GoodDoctors.Health and order your exploratory panel. And if you'd like access to our more advanced materials, click our Register Now link. Get free access to our next upcoming webinar. And until next time, stay well, stay sharp, stay clear, here and let us help you keep it all together.